So you think you know what a project is? Well, think again. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode 542 and I am a very excited Cornelius Fichtner here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I am very excited because, well, the PMBOK Guide 8th edition has dropped. It is built from tens of thousands of data points collected from real practitioners, and it shows. The structure is cleaner, the guidance is really more practical, and the entire document reflects how projects actually unfold, rather than how we would sometimes like to imagine they should unfold on paper in our schedules, and you know how it goes. It is a deliberate move towards clarity, usability, and the relevance for the work that we project managers do every single day. The 8th edition also updated the definitions for several foundational concepts that many of us assumed were set in stone, and that includes the definition of both project and project management, which is why I started today's episode with, so you think you know what a project is? We'll see those new definitions later on. Guiding us through the thinking behind these changes is Jesse Fewell. Jesse has coached leaders on 5 continents, shaped multiple certifications and standards, and served as the chair of the PMBOK 8 development effort. He brings a front row view of what the global community asked for and how those insights shaped this new edition. And here he is. Welcome, Jesse Fewell. Thank you for joining us today.
It is an absolute treat, Cornelius. I'm excited to be back on the podcast and to talk about this new exploration, definition, formalization of what it means to do project management.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And as the chair of PMBOK 8, Wayne's World, we are not worthy. We are not worthy. Thank you so much for having you here. Yes. All right. We already got the first comment here coming in. Greetings from Azerbaijan. We have a worldwide audience with us today.
Welcome to you, Kamran.
Yeah. As always, this is a video episode. If you're only getting the audio, please stop by at pm-podcast.com/542/YouTube or /Spotify. Before we start this interview, there is one thing that I need to get off my chest. That's this here. The PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK Guide. Repeat, not a test of the PMBOK Guide. Reading the PMBOK Guide will help, yeah, sure, but it's only one of many resources that you need to use as you are preparing for your PMP exam. With that out of the way, let us begin. Jesse, how was the 8th edition developed, and what problems or gaps is it really designed to solve for today's project managers?
Well, Cornelius, there's really 2 key themes. The first one is that there is a regular renewal cycle that is required by ANSI, which is the standards body that accredits the PMBOK Guide as the global standard for project management. And their requirement is that the document is updated on a regular cadence every few years in order to reflect any evolutions and variations and changes in the industry, in the global marketplace. So there will be a 9th edition. It's coming in a few years, the same way that this has been on a regular recurring cycle. So that's point number 1. There's been a lot of practitioners who complain, why do they keep changing things? And it's because the world keeps changing. And it's the accrediting body's position that the standard of practice should reflect evolution and nuances and ebbs and flows in the industry. So that's point number 1. which is that it changes the order of life. But the deeper question I think you're asking is why were specific changes made for the 8th edition? Is that a fair
That is, yes.
Yeah. Okay. The 7th edition was intentionally disrupted. The 7th edition, which was released in 2021, reformatted what was traditionally understood to be knowledge areas, process groups, inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs, and just blew it up completely in order to shake up the community, shake up the profession, to wake up that things are changing in the world, and at the same time move to a principle-based standard of project management as opposed to a process-based standard of project management. As you can imagine, there was mixed response to that. And so the 8th edition was launched with the conviction that this will be not about opinions, not about disruption. It will be the most data-driven project management standard in history. And it is, as I think you've alluded to a little bit already.
Yeah, you had like 15,000 comments from people that you had to go through. Did you read each one of them? Not you personally, right? You had, as the chair, you're at the top, you have all the people helping.
There were 24 volunteers involved. It was a double-blind process of 12 development team volunteers and then 12 review team volunteers. None of them knew who the other was, and I was the chair, kind of as the anonymous bridge between them. And yes, we looked at every single comment, and the review team had their own comments before the 15,000, such that by the time the 1,500 contributors saw the draft, it had already been vetted a little bit. And that's even after the market research went into understanding what the community wanted in the 8th edition.
Mm-hmm. All right. So much for the story behind the PMBOK guide. Now, let us open it up. Our plan is to take the PMBOK guide 8th edition table of contents and discuss some hand-picked topics. It's quite thick. Let's see, I have it right here. 294 pages. We can't look at everything. And what we see here is a simplified version of the table of contents. Generally speaking, it consists of 3 segments. The standard for project management is first, then the actual PMBOK guide is second, and then we have sort of the back matter, the extras, and all of that. And Jesse, for those who don't know, what is the difference between the standard and the PMBOK guide?
This is the 3rd edition in a row that has differentiated between those 2 different parts of the document. The document, the first half of the document is what is accredited by ANSI as a standard for project management. It goes through additional extra validation and governance to make sure that there are opportunities for community comment, and that there's a consensus vote from a committee, and all of those things. And that's where what we believe to be the most important fundamental elements of project management are located. The second part, which is sometimes called the guide or sometimes called the body of knowledge, is more about the how. It's more about some of the tools that we like to use in project management, which are very contextual, very nuanced, and can be tailored in or tailored out. The standard includes the things that are universal. The guide or the body of knowledge includes things that are a little bit more contextual and case by case.
Okay, thank you very much. And from my perspective as a practitioner, you need to read both. right? You can't just
Absolutely.
say, "Oh, I'm just following the standard," or "I'm just going to read the PMBOK guide," or I'm just gonna read the appendices." Yeah, not going to help you much there. But you need to understand the content of the law in order to really know how to manage a project in its entirety.
And some people will find that the content in the body of knowledge, that second part, it's kind of the more interesting stuff. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's kind of where we get nerdy and technical. And yet we also want to make sure that people don't skip over that standard part. So
which is right. It used to be second. I remember in previous editions, it was in the back. It was kind of hidden and nobody knew about it. And now it's first. So yeah, emphasis is right there. All right. Let us now head over. So for the rest of the conversation, this is the actual table of contents here. And let us begin with the system for value delivery, which is the second item there in the standard. Would it be correct to say, Jesse, value and the system that describes it is really at the core of what a project is supposed to do? Deliver value?
100%. This has been a conversation that's been evolving and intensifying, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years, which is that the project management of the 20th century was get it done. Project management of the 21st century is, was it worth it? Mm-hmm. And just because it's done doesn't mean it was worth it. And so we're being challenged more and more in every sector, in every country, in every industry. Do you even know why we're doing this? And can you make the case that we should keep going? And usually project managers, or historically project managers, have said, that's above my pay grade. It's not my job to be able to articulate whether what I'm doing is even worth doing. And that's more of a portfolio discussion or a sponsor discussion. And what we're finding in the marketplace is change is happening so fast that our sponsors can't even articulate the value proposition of their projects. They need help from you, project manager, to ask tough questions. Why are we doing this? Who are the stakeholders who benefit? Who are the stakeholders who would not benefit? What's kind of an impact? How would you measure that impact? These are the kinds of questions that we're being expected to bring to bear and articulate the value of a project within an organization or even within an ecosystem of vendors and suppliers. It's more than just get it done.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And people do agree. We have LinkedIn users saying that is the truth. Next, let us zoom in here because you gave us a good segue. Was it worth it? Let us zoom in here on 2.1.2, assessing project success. I have the definition of project success over here. Let me read this for everybody. Project success is defined as the consensus view across intended beneficiaries, other stakeholders, and project participants that a project was perceived to have delivered value that was worth the effort and expense. And now let me highlight two words in this definition: consensus and perceived, because this definition clearly says that a consensus of how the participants perceive a project is what counts. So even if the project is behind schedule, over budget, and all of that, if the consensus of your stakeholder says, no, you know what? Yeah. These are all issues, but we solved them. In the end, this project was still worth it. That is an important thing to realize. Jesse, would you highlight different words here? Is there anything else that you might want to highlight?
Oh my goodness. I like the way that you highlighted this. There's a couple of reasons, and then there's a concrete example. So first, consensus does not mean unanimous, nor does it mean strictly from the highest, the hippo the highest paid person's opinion. The consensus really is like on the whole. Maybe it's a majority, maybe it's a plurality, and so that's key number point. And the other one is that value perceived is value achieved. That because value is hard to measure. This is one thing that the Agilists have I think not been able to articulate well. The Agilists have been promoting deliver value, focus on value. How do I measure that? We don't know. Okay, so then value is in the eye of the beholder. We have net promoter score, we've got customer satisfaction, we've got ROI. So depending on your context, your metric might be different. So then the value is really going to end up being contextual and perception based. Just think, here's the example, about the Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House is mentioned in the guide as the classic example of 10x over budget, 5x over schedule. The PM of Australia lost their job because the project was undergoing so much upheaval. There was a riot on the construction site of the Sydney Opera House, and it's a UNESCO heritage site. It's considered
it's a success in the end.
World. Yeah. It is heralded as like one of the greatest architectural achievements of mankind. It is the symbol of Australian sky of the Sydney skyline. So was it worth it? Yeah, it's considered to be one of those failed projects that was totally worth it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Does this new definition, this updated, this modernized definition of project success mean that project managers should also change the way that they measure and evaluate success on their projects?
Absolutely. We'll talk about it in a moment. But in the guide, there's an entire domain, an entire discipline around executing on a project in a way that measures project performance. So one of the new processes that's introduced is to measure project performance, which is two sides. There's delivery performance, schedule, risk, compliance, budget, but then there's value performance, net promoter score, customer satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction, ROI, revenue. Project performance now includes both conventional, historical, traditional delivery excellence, but also on the value side.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Before we move on, let me remind everybody, we are live on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat, and we'll see if we can squeeze this in for everybody. Okay, let us move on here. Where are we? Let's see, for some reason, is my computer... There we go. Okay. It didn't want to do what I was wanting it to do. We are moving on here to this, where we see the 6 project management principles. They, let me go through them. They start on the left there at 3.3 with adopt a holistic view. Below 3.4, focus on value. 3.5, embed quality into processes and deliverables. At the bottom left, 3.6, be an accountable leader. Top right, 3.7, integrate sustainability within all project areas. And below that, 3.8, build an empowered culture. Many principles... Go ahead. You wanted to say something, Jesse?
No, I'm just like, yeah, those are the 6 principles of project management.
Right. So many could have made it into this particular list. What was the reasoning behind choosing these 6 as the universal foundation?
Well, it was in response to some of the practitioner feedback around the 7th edition, which actually introduced 12.
12, yeah.
And generally speaking, where the practitioners were coming back, 3 out of 4 project managers said, we agree that principles matter more than processes. They're both important, but at the end of the day, what makes for a successful leader are your guidelines, your guiding ways of managing and leading, how you approach things, like focusing on an empowered culture, so that way you can delegate effectively instead of being the center of gravity all the time. That's an example of what makes for successful projects. So the 7th edition was reflecting what was a community conviction that their effective management and leadership is not about following a process. It's about leading. However, it was a little bit overwhelming, 12 of them. There was some duplication, not just within the principles. There were 2 different principles around leadership so around accountability and leadership were 2 different principles. Here, they've been merged into one that seems to be a little bit more focused. Also, there was some confusion about, well, we have a quality principle, but we also have quality processes. What's the difference between a process versus a domain versus a section? And so we intended to remove as much duplication and repetition as possible with the 8th edition and just make everything simpler.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Let's see, before we move on to the next few questions, let me bring up these here because we have a few comments and questions. Can we claim PDUs for this session? Yes, I'll mention this at the end. Next, when will PMBOK guide be included in the PMP ECO? That's what I mentioned at the beginning. The PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK guide. However, the new exam content outline has already been published. Things are in alignment with the PMBOK guide, like the new definitions and all of that, but it is not a test of the PMBOK guide. Some of you may have noticed me looking at the PMBOK guide. Here it is. I have a copy. I bought it at the Global Summit. And because of this question here, does value engineering play any specific role in assessing and determining the value? I looked in the index. Value engineering does not seem to be mentioned in here. So Jesse, in my opinion, this matches exactly the next question as well. I think project success, social benefits, and major environmental impact should be added in definition. To me, both these questions go a little too deep because, remember, it's the consensus whether I feel that it was worth it, whether the value has been achieved. So if in your opinion, value engineering is part of it, and you think, no, based on value engineering, it was not achieved, well, there you go. If in this opinion here, you feel that social benefit was achieved, major environmental impact, we didn't have any, that is your understanding of what it means to be successful. So you put these thoughts into the definition. The definition is fine, I think. You are trying to put more into it, which is what you need to do when you yourself are asked, was it worth it? Jesse, is my interpretation here right?
I think you're onto something there, Cornelius. At Actor Shaikh 619 is making the point about value engineering. I think that would be an effective technique to make the case that the project is either overperforming or underperforming when you're doing an executive briefing or a stakeholder presentation. So value engineering could be a way to capture, identify, communicate the value that a project is delivering. At Vatsal Ramesh, the project success definition is intended to be inclusive, such that the context determines the societal benefit and the environmental impact, or the sustainability impact. Remember, sustainability is one of the core principles, and so it will go into the perception of value around a project. But the definition stops short of committing the perception to just those dimensions.
All right. We are about halfway through our conversation here today, so let us continue. And from here, we are moving on to the project life cycle right
Ooh.
here. And we are going to be taking a look at two areas in the project life cycle. First of all, we have 4.2 there, the development approaches, predictive, adaptive, and hybrid. And then second, we want to look at what we know as what we knew as the process groups. They are now under the heading of focus areas. So Jesse, when we look at predictive, adaptive, and hybrid in PMBOK 8, so we're talking about the top portion here, are these simply approaches that we already know? Agile is agile, or did the team redefine them in a way that would surprise us practitioners?
I think it's fair to say that the predictive, adaptive, and hybrid are essentially going to be very familiar to those of us who have already been working in either agile ways of working or so-called waterfall approaches with more formal serial plan-driven approaches versus highly adaptive and iterative approach. I think it's going to be mostly familiar. It continues the community's usage of the term predictive versus adaptive, which was introduced back in, I believe, 2013 with the 5th edition, is a way to be more inclusive. The agile waterfall debate can be a little bit divisive. And so for the last 12, 15 years, PMI has been intentionally using that language as a way to describe a spectrum, because no project is fully plan-driven and predictive with zero change. And no project is all adaptive, 100% exploratory with no concept of where we're going. There's always some place where you live on that spectrum, and a hybrid approach tends to be a blending of different places on that spectrum at the same time.
Okay.
So
wonderful.
it's very familiar it should be familiar to most people.
Yeah, thank you very much. Because this also answers this question here from Abidaj1. What are the new development approaches and life cycles being emphasized, and how do they integrate with the principles? I think nothing new. I mean, you did not come up with a new development approach. You did not come up with a new life cycle. But let's focus on the last one here. How do they integrate with the principles? Is there some sort of a mapping table? Is there some sort of a combo? How does this work?
What's important about the principles is that they are universal, foundational to every project, regardless of which approach you take. So when we talk about embedding quality into everything we do, this is not simply about following quality management processes. It's about having a quality mindset in a predictive environment where maybe we have a lot of quality control and quality engineering, or maybe also in an adaptive environment where there's a deep lean thinking ethos where we're going to shift left on a lot of quality practices to make sure that we're iterating internally to verify the work before we validate it with stakeholders. In either approach, the principles, like embedding quality into everything that we do, are universal, regardless of approach. So that's the intention there with the standard, is that it's applicable to every project, regardless of which approach the project takes.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And let's not forget, when you look at the development approaches here, predictive, adaptive, and hybrid, and when we go back to the principles, focus on value. Doesn't matter whether this is adaptive or hybrid. Be an accountable leader. Build an empowered culture, right? There is no real reason why you can't do that in one of these development approaches there. Let us move down. 4.5, I said we'd be looking at that. What prompted the development team to bring back the essence of process groups under the name focus areas?
Demand. by public demand. By
Yes,
public
you
demand,
heard our voices. Okay, clearly. Yeah.
absolutely 80% of all project managers in the world came back and said, hey, where did the process groups go? 80% of project managers saying, like, isn't it true that every project has some form of initiating, launching? Isn't it true every project has some element of planning and executing, and that there's some level of monitor and control, and eventually projects are closed out to some degree. It might take, even if they're a multi-year project. And so the community came back to the standards team with this demand, overwhelming universal agreement that these 5 things are foundational to every project everywhere, whether it's agile or it's predictive or hybrid, that these 5 things are important. They were no longer going to be tied to processes. Planning happens regardless of what processes you use. Execution happens regardless of which processes you use. How you do your execution, your monitoring, controlling, and your planning is really up to the project-specific context. So you can use processes, and we make the point of highlighting this. You can use the processes, maybe use the 40 processes that we offered, or you can use informal practice instead. How you go about those 5 focus areas is independent of the processes or practices or policies or traditions or habits that you're using, as long as you focus on them being done well.
Mm. I like the comment we got here from Dottie102. It is a testament to how ingrained the focus areas are in our craft. They are in our blood. Yes, it is true. It is true, especially if you have, started, like I think I started with PMBOK version 2 originally. That was the first one that I read.
Oh my goodness.
It's been quite a long time there. From here, we want to move on. We're leaving the standard behind us. We're moving to the second section of the document here, which is called the PMBOK guide. Yeah. Here is what PMI says, what we can expect. From the PMBOK guide, we can benefit from an evolved structure that connects principles, domains, and focus areas in a clear, actionable way. You have already spoken towards this. Where would you say that we as practitioners will feel the biggest aha moment, so to say, as we navigate the new structure and review the new document here?
I would say that for more experienced and tenured members of our community, they're going to have an aha where they start seeing that the processes have different names than they've been familiar with in the 6th edition or before, and that the categories in which you find the processes, they're no longer knowledge areas, they're performance domains, and they themselves have different names. For example, cost management used to be, or budget management used to be one of the core expectations of project management, but today it's now broader to be finance performance. What is the financial performance of your project? And that's not just how much money you're spending. We're more than just human calculators as project practitioners. We also need to take a look at the financial equation around funding, around the financial equation around whether we're going to generate revenue from this. What is the holistic financial scenario around this project? Not just how much did you spend, how much did you spend, how much did you spend? And so I think that's going to be the most interesting evolution that that people will see who happen to be familiar with older versions of the PMBOK guide.
All right, let's open it up. Here is the table of contents from the actual PMBOK guide. We want to quickly review the performance domains that Jesse has mentioned. Again, they're on the left and right. Let me read them out for everybody. 2.1 at the top left there, governance performance domain. 2.2, scope performance domain. 2.3, schedule performance domain. And the bottom left is the finance performance domain that Jesse just mentioned. Then at the top right, we have the stakeholder performance domain. Below that, 2.6, the resources performance domain. And then below that, the risk performance domain is 2.7. Project managers will notice that, well, several long-standing domains vanished. Communication, quality, for example, they are no longer here, right? Jesse, I'm pretty sure you're not saying, oh, quality is no longer important. We don't need to do this on a project. Communication, very unimportant. That's why we moved it out. How are they woven into the new structure? Where do we do quality? How do we do communication? Where's the guidance on these?
Well, let's talk about quality. This was a hot debate.
I imagine.
This was a hot debate. The 7th edition also emphasized quality as an important consideration. And eventually what we came to was the conviction that we have to practice what we preach. If we're saying that quality is a fundamental principle of everything we do, whether it's process quality or product quality, quality assurance or quality control, if we believe that in our bones as a fundamental principle of every project, no matter approach, then perhaps we should embed it into the very scope of the project. And perhaps we should embed it into the governance of the project overall. And so we implemented the principle, embed quality into everything you do, into the document itself.
Yeah, right. And you know, I hadn't noticed that before, but you know, principle number 3, embed quality into processes and deliverables. There it is, right? Are these 7, this is really a rhetorical question, but I have to ask it anyway. Are these 7 domains meant to be stable for a long time? Do you see them evolving as our profession evolves?
Well, so now you're asking me to be a bit of a fortune
crystal ball.
Yes. I would say it's fair to say absolutely. I think the 9th edition will have a different set of categories. The same way the 7th had a different performance domains relative to the 6th's difference of knowledge areas. And the 6th edition knowledge areas were different than the 5th edition, which were different than the 4th edition. Every edition reflects the change of the profession. If we're looking for stability in what project management means, look inside yourself, because the world around us is changing all the time. And that means that the practice is evolving all the time. And the one constant that you have is you. And so I'm going to be looking at me to change my techniques and my skills and my approaches, because the profession is changing, because the marketplace is changing. So I think it's fair to say that if each edition has reflected, each edition itself has had changes that reflected the changes in the marketplace. I don't know about you, but just in the last year, everything has changed so much. I can't even envision what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yes. From here, we are now leaving the PMBOK guide. We're going into the back matter. So we've looked at the standard, we've looked at the PMBOK guide. Before we head into the back matter, Jesse, is there anything from your perspective that you would like to add at this point for our audience in regards to when you read this new document, when you look at the standard, when you look at the PMBOK guide, things that we should keep in mind that were very important for you and your team during the development effort?
I think one of the bits of feedback that we got again and again from the community was we need more examples. And so this is something that you'll notice in the 6 principles in the standard are accompanied by a section called Principles in Action, where we give a concrete illustration of what it looks like to exhibit a behavioral pattern like accountable leadership or accountable leadership. Likewise, in the guide with the performance domains, there's an entire section offering 3 concrete examples of how that particular arena, whether it's finance, performance, whether it's scope, performance, what it looks like in actual practice. So the one thing I would encourage you to do is go straight to those examples, because it will be more than just, the intent is to make it not as theoretical, but to start moving into the practical.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And that also is a good segue into this question here. We have another question about the PMP exam. What about the changes in the PMP exam? Does it shift the focus to memorization from to situational? No, 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 no. Let me once again repeat, the PMP exam is not a test of the PMBOK guide. Therefore, you do not need to memorize the PMBOK guide. Instead, the PMP exam tests your experience as a project manager. Situations that every project manager sees day to day are being tested. How would you react? Do you understand what a normal project manager
whatever
would
a
do
normal project
in
manager
those situations? Yes, exactly. Whatever a normal project manager is. After all, every project is the same. From here, we are moving on to the last topic from the table of contents. It's in the back matter. And yes, everybody is interested in this right here. Artificial intelligence.
Ooh.
Now, yeah. A little bit critical maybe on my side here.
Oh,
the AI appendix, it outlines high-level use cases. AI can do real-time monitoring. AI can automate processes. AI can identify risks, and so on. So there are about 3-4 pages of this, right? Honestly, they do feel a little light. They do feel maybe a little theoretical as well. But is it maybe because when we look at today's project management software, solid AI tools that really help us and really bring AI to the forefront of how we manage projects, they are far and few in between. Is that what I'm seeing here? How did you work on this? Or is my critique unfounded from your perspective?
No, I think it's a fair take on this appendix. This appendix was intended to be a hyperlink to PMI's standard practice guides on AI. So if you go onto the PMI website right now, you'll see on their landing page a lot of resources around AI, whether it's the Infinity tool set, but also the practice guide for AI and project management is something that is not just available, but also in development. There are going to be multiple editions of this. There's going to be a practice guide around how to project manage an AI project. There's also going to be a practice guide about how to embed AI into project management. And this appendix was intended to be a hyperlink to some of the ideas to be thinking about as we start moving into the AI PM world. Remember, we started working on this 2 years ago, right about when ChatGPT launched. And so what was happening is, as we were evolving the guide and as we were taking community input, overwhelmingly practitioners were like, we need something. And so we felt it was appropriate to put into the 8th edition some concepts that are fairly stable, fairly universal, but the details are just so volatile. You can't really put those into a standard and hope that it survives more than 3 months.
All right.
So that's kind of why it's a little bit ethereal and not really tangible, because there are other standards, guidelines that are coming out, and because it's such a volatile space.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, especially for saying the word tangible, because that is much better word than my word theoretical that I use. So tangible is actually, or feels a little intangible is what I should have said. Yeah. Okay. And final question here before we begin closing out our conversation here. X 3.3 there, in about the middle, responsible use and ethical concerns. So from your perspective, if a project manager wants to start using AI responsibly after reading this Appendix X3 here, what is the very first practical step that you personally believe that they should take on Monday morning?
Check everything. Check everything. I'm working with a senior executive at a large military manufacturer who is asking about the use of Microsoft Copilot inside Microsoft Project. And wouldn't it be great if we could just have that available so that I can quickly re-level my integrated master schedule? And so I hit a button and I'm like, make this project more efficient, timeline, go. And then it does the work. And then you look at it, you feel, oh, fantastic. It just saved me so many hours. And it somehow strangely deleted 10% of my line items out of the schedule because AI does that. And so whatever you're using a tool, I have found it most helpful to get inspired by the tool on what to put into an email or what the template should look like, but not to just copy paste the results into my my next briefings. So buyer beware on any of the AI content that you're using. It's not intended to be a copy paste or a click and be done. It's intended to be a co-pilot, if you will.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Which means we are moving to the closeout.
Ooh.
Let's come back to my opening statement. So you think you know what a project is? Think again. And here we want to take a look at the updated modern definitions. Two of them, in fact. First of all, this is what a project is. A project is a temporary initiative in a unique context undertaken to create value. This new definition, crisp, compact. What misconceptions about projects were you trying to resolve with this wording?
So if you go back to the previous definition, this is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique project, service, or result.
Yeah, exactly.
That definition is 40 years old. It has not changed since the PMI first started thinking of what a body of knowledge would look like, or a codification of practice would look like. And if you think about the terminology at the time, a unique product, service, or result is focusing on the thing. It's focusing on the deliverable, not on the value proposition that the deliverable supports. And so what happens a lot of times on projects is that there'll be a pivot. There'll be a fundamental change request that comes in and says, you know what, we need to chop off this part of the scope in favor of this part of the scope. Or we've just blown through our schedule. We need to rethink the value proposition. And does that mean now that the unique product, service, or result is obsolete? Sometimes it does. Instead, the value proposition now needs to be served by a different product or a different service or a different result. This also, the re-examining of definitions came independently of the project success research the PMI was doing to define what project success was, which is whether it's considered worth it. And so we were challenged as a team to think, it's been 40 years. Should we be rethinking what fundamentally the project is about? And projects are not about the thing, they're about the why behind the thing that we're building.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to bring up another misconception here that I need to clear up. Does the current PMP exam question refer to version 8 concepts? No, they do not. The new PMP exam is going to be launched in July of 2026. Until that time, you do not need to worry really about PMBOK 8. it'll help, but you don't really need to worry about it. Final slide here. We are moving on from the definition of project to the definition of project management, which is now the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet or exceed the intended value. Once again, this definition puts the intended value at the finish line. How then would that influence how we define the scope, how we plan, how we lead? What's your insight here that you can share with us?
Yeah, the original definition for project management at the same time as that definition of project came out in the 1986 pre-PMBOK, called out that the definition of project management was an application of knowledge, skills, and tools to meet or exceed project stakeholder expectations. And then somewhere along the way, our community said, no, it's about the requirements. And so the definition of project over the recent 10 to 15 years has been about satisfying project requirements. What if the requirements are wrong? And guess what, project manager? That's your job. Your job is to make sure that the project requirements capture some kind of a business case, some kind of a value proposition in order to move forward. So I'm about to audit a very large IT project right now where there's one executive that says the requirements are the definition of success. I'm not going to pay for anything more, and I'm not going to tolerate any further delays, the requirements. But then there's another executive in a different department, they're both peers, who says, but I won't be able to use it. Now, the one who wants to use it is not the one paying for it. It's the other executive. And so now they get to have an executive cage match. Go fight it over. I'm the project manager. All I did was reveal you have a fundamental misalignment on what the success of a project is. And it's my job not to solve that, but to make sure that it gets solved by the appropriate players. That's what project management is. It's not complying to requirements. It's meeting expectations of what the value proposition is about.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. With that, we have come to the end of our conversation here on the PMBOK Guide 8th edition. We looked at the standard, we looked at the PMBOK Guide, and third, we looked a little bit at the back matter there with AI. Before I say thank you very much, let's let people know where they can get their copy of the PMBOK Guide. I bought mine at the Global Summit. You probably got one for free, I hope, for all the work that you've put into this. Where can our audience get the PMBOK Guide?
So if you just go to PMI's website and look under the standards section, and it is the flagship standard, it'll be right there for free download to anyone who is a PMI member in good standing, not merely a certification holder, but if you are a paying member in good standing with an annual membership that comes renewal each year, it's a free download, PDF, go for it. If you want a hard copy, then you can pre-order your print copy today to be shipped to your home in January. The full print run is going to be happening over the holidays. So just go to the PMI's website and you'll be able to take a look either for your free member download or a paper copy or a non-member digital copy for purchase.
Right. And I think if you want it in a language other than English, you have to wait until April, if I remember the date correctly, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
The translations are underway and will be released in the middle of 2026.
All right. Jesse, thank you so much for being here. It's only been a little over a week since PMBOK 8 has been released. I really appreciate your flexibility to come on here and bring the new PMBOK Guide to our audience. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Absolute treat. And for those of you who want to talk about this more, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have a personal policy of accepting any invite from any project practitioner. would love to continue the conversation.
Right. I will put your LinkedIn profile link into the show notes of this episode here, which is episode 542 of the Project Management Podcast. Once again, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cornelius. All the best.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please do visit pm-podcast.com/542 for the show notes and also for Jesse's LinkedIn profile link. You can claim PDUs for participating, watching, listening to this episode. Looks like about 0.75 PDUs in ways of working. And our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this here, the Galaxy Brain meme, which should have been animated, but it isn't. So let me walk you through it. At the top left, the first brain is when you're thinking that, yeah, PMBOK 8, that's just PMBOK 7 with new lipstick. Below that, the second brain, a little bit more active, when you realize, oh my, the principles have changed. Then at the top right, your brain is getting more activity going. You're realizing the domains have changed. And lastly, at the bottom right, your brain is exploding because you realize even the definition of the term project has changed. And with that, I bid you farewell. Until next time.